Hi, Charlotte. How are you doing today?
Hey, not too bad. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing all right. One thing I was thinking about. So, did you hear the news story this week about Justin Timberlake? Did you hear the news about Justin Timberlake?
How could I miss it?
So
But
he,
tell me, what do you think?
as I understand it, so correct me if you heard something else, but he was arrested for drunk driving, right? And
Yeah.
the kind of most amusing thing about the story, in my view, and what all the headlines seemed to actually be about, was the police officer who arrested him was so young that he didn't know who he was. And Justin Timberlake made some comment like, "This is going to ruin my tour." And the police
This is
officer was
going to
like,
ruin
"What tour?" So,
the world tour.
yeah, that's right.
Just a
That's right.
tragedy.
I forgot he responded with that. So, my question for you is, what makes you feel old? Because it seems to me police officers who are younger apparently than we are and don't even know what our generation's
Just,
music is. And to be
yeah.
fair, Justin Timberlake was a little earlier than like when we, came of age in high school or whatever. But
I
what
mean, but
makes
he had
you
sort of
feel
a
old?
renaissance,
That's true.
with suit and tie and stuff. Like I am sort of surprised by that. But yeah, no, that's I have started added this is going to ruin the tour to my vernacular.
I like that. I like that a lot.
But oh, what makes me feel old? I mean, besides that, um, that's a good question. I I think really the biggest thing so far is the music. I it's tragic that I don't have a separate answer for this, but it's just hearing like our high school bops like in oldies mixes on Spotify and stuff. Like
Yeah.
this is now, the stuff that I, haven't really moved on from is now sort of like I don't know its own genre music or its own era music. So
When
I
my
just
son was born, I realized that the music we grew up with is now as old as the music our parents grew up with when we were my son's age.
it's just awful.
So yeah, at least for me, because like I'm 30 years younger than my dad, and my son's 30 years younger than me. So like,
Yeah.
the 90s music now is like the 60s music of when we were young. And
Yes.
our music is like the classic rock 70s that our parents said was so good and stuff. And it's
Like
like, that's,
you don't know what you're listening to, you kids. Yeah.
that's
Well, and
just,
just that, and go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, it's so weird to me to think about it from that perspective.
Yep. And the fact that I don't know any of really like today's, like I know like the big hits, but I'm not anywhere near as familiar with today's artists.
Well, and I don't like it so much. I mean, I do hear
Yeah.
some that I like. I kind of like the new Sabrina Carpenter stuff, but I just so often I
Okay.
hear music and I think it's like this is slow and depressing. Where are our trashy party
Where
songs
are the
from when we were
bops?
young? When we were, where's Kesha? Save us. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, I am Mark Gross.
I am Charlotte Ferris.
And this is Scene by Scene. And today we're going to be looking at the Charlotte Fair show. This is the episode Charades, episode 9 from season 4. And I picked a season 4 episode because season 4 is really one of my absolute favorites.
Solid
So,
season.
Charlotte, you said you watched this last night.
I did.
Did
I
you
did.
remember this episode?
Yes, I did. Uh, just because it was one of the big group ones, you know,
Okay,
like
yeah.
this one kind of stuck with me. Just, which I like. I like episodes where the whole gang sort of comes together.
I do too. They were always just so hard to coordinate
Oh, I'm
sometimes,
sure.
but
I'm sure. Yeah, I can't imagine.
well, anyway, so this episode starts, of course, with the credits. The season, Charlotte sits down at the end of the credits with her camera in hand. We had some new autumn shots, which I really loved in this season in the credits.
That's right.
And the episode opens with Will. Charlotte looking very miserable. I thought you played that pretty well in that
Thanks.
scene. You say
Definitely.
you say you need to get going, and Will asks if he talks too much, and then he talks so much that Charlotte isn't able to answer. There's a knock at the door. Charlotte tells Will someone's at the door, and he proceeds to tell a story of how someone was at his door yesterday, and then she hangs up. So, just a short scene with Will. He does come back here again in a moment, but just a little short scene with Will. We, of course, had at least one Will episode per season focusing on him, but this was just a brief occurrence. Will's actually, interestingly, my grandma's favorite character. She watches these episodes with me, and she's always so excited when Will is in the episode.
He just played it so perfectly. Just, you never believe it. He very much embodied Will. Just the sort of the earnestness.
Yeah, I wish I could remember whose idea that character was. I remember he kind of volunteered and asked to be included in the show, so I wrote him in, but I can't remember if it was his suggestion or mine to have Will talk so much.
Well, either way, I think it added something.
Anyway, John comes in and announces that he's going on a date with Karen. Charlotte realizes he means Caroline and says she's surprised she would agree to that. And John agrees and notes that she must be really desperate. John doesn't realize that he insulted himself and argues that it's actually insulting to Caroline because she's the one who's desperate. That joke made me laugh as I was rewatching this one for sure.
Yeah, same.
Those slightly unexpected ones are always, I think, the best.
Yeah. Agreed. I wonder how many names there were for Caroline throughout the series.
That's a good question. I do not have a list. I could go through all the scripts, but yeah, I'd have to manually search it.
Gosh.
That was kind of one of my favorite running jokes. I'm sure there's a lot of them.
Yeah. It was a good one. Although Karen, I don't think that had the same weight back then that it does today.
Yeah. Speaking of feeling old, that was a little too early for Karen.
Man.
So Charlotte decides that she needs to call Caroline. She doesn't realize Will's still on the phone. Will wants Caroline's number to chat with her too, and recommends she get Skype. And that's what made me think to ask this question of what makes you feel old, because the idea that Skype was still a thing kind of made me feel old.
You mean Skype wasn't eternal?
It seems like it died out right during the pandemic, when you would have thought it would have had its renaissance.
Have its heyday. I know. It's still weird to me.
So, and then Charlotte gives Caroline's number, 911. So this was actually based on a true story. I had a friend who, we were at lunch in high school, and a guy came and asked for her number, and it was like, oh, my friends are daring me to ask for your number, so I just have to do it. Can you please give me your number? She said, oh, sure, it's 911. And then she just stopped. And
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And the guy was like, no, please, seriously, just give me your number. And she was like, oh yeah, I did. It's 911. And he finally left her alone. But I thought that was kind of a clever way to defer.
That is. Just, oh man. So, I would love to have that kind of come back at the moment. Gosh.
I know. She must have had that one pre-planned.
Yes.
Charlotte calls Caroline, and she reveals that she met an awesome guy named Sam, so she wants to break her date with John, and Charlotte actually defends John and says Caroline
surprising.
Shouldn't break the date. So I guess Charlotte has some morals after all, right?
I guess. Even when it comes to John.
Which always seemed to be the exception, at least until, do you remember the season, I think, 3 episode where they have the big fight and they don't talk to each other for a while, and finally Charlotte apologizes, and so I think that was kind of a turning point. Maybe this is sort of hearkening to that idea a little bit.
Yeah. Don't hate each other all the time. There we go.
So the scene ends with Charlotte saying incredulously, "How mean," and it fades out.
Good Lord.
I
mean, it was
yeah,
objectively. So. There are limits.
So we open the next scene in the living room. John is sighing, trying to get Charlotte's attention, which I thought reminded me kind of like what a 4-year-old would do, maybe. So
Yep.
she finally says in a very sincere tone, "Come on, cheer up, John." Not a very convincing tone, of course.
No, not at all.
And John asks, how can he cheer up when he knows that Susan is out with someone else? So there we can add that second name to your list.
There we go. There's 2. Yep.
Charlotte reminds him her name is Caroline, and that gets a big laugh from the studio audience, of course. Mm-hmm. What were you going to say?
No, I just found the beginning of the scene, like what are they? Do they often have like just reading parties, or sheet music reading parties? Is the case I think was in that scene.
Well, of course. What it really was is just
grabbing whatever was
the
around.
first thing on hand.
Yeah.
Because in the first couple seasons, usually the scenes opened with us just kind of sitting there staring at each other.
Yeah, I guess that was a fix.
So Charlotte, of course, suggests to go to the Wahlberg Diner. Where else are they going to go in this one-horse town?
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh.
Scene ends, and what do you know? Caroline and Sam are at the very diner, the only one in town, where John and Charlotte have decided to go.
Oh.
And when Charlotte says, "We had no idea you'd be here," I'm not sure if I should hear that as in earnest or a passive aggressive
I couldn't tell either,
we came
to be
here
honest.
to ruin your date. I guess you don't remember what was going through your head.
What was the intention? I had
know.
the same thought.
Honestly, I'll bet when I was writing it, I meant it to be kind of in earnest, but
Okay.
watching
it was not
it
the way
now,
it was maybe delivered.
but watching it now, obviously, where else are they going to be on a date in Waldburg, this town with one restaurant?
One restaurant. Yep.
And we only ever see one table in that restaurant too.
Yeah, it's true. Might just be communal dining kind of situation. Very modern.
So
Anyway,
Chester Winfield plays, he'll later play Nick. Right now he's playing Sam this episode. Also, conveniently, someone who's dating Valerie's character again, like Nick will. Caroline explains they were just playing charades. I'm not sure how only 2 people really do this.
Yeah, that's questionable. In the restaurant too? Just...
But anyway, she invites them to join along. John says, since they have nothing better to do, Alice, they will. Name number 3.
3.
Sam is confused because he thought her name was Caroline. And, yeah. So Caroline...
Are we all?
Caroline whispers to John what to play, and John's first motioning upwards... Charlotte figures out he means north, and then he gestures backstabbing, and Charlotte realizes he means Caroline and figures out that the clue is North Carolina.
Sorry.
Long before we realized that Charlotte would eventually move to North Carolina in her spin-off series.
Yeah, some foreshadowing.
So Caroline is confused how Charlotte got her name from mean, horrible backstabber, and Charlotte plays dumb sarcastically while John flat out says that it's because they broke their date. She broke their date, and everyone, including Sam, piles on to criticize Caroline. She apologizes, invites John on a date next Saturday. Sam complains, "Oh, but we have a date next Saturday." And John invites them to play charades again because it really made him feel better, and we go to the end credits.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good one. Go ahead.
The weird thing is that I almost always buried what I considered the weakest episode of the season as episode 9 of this season, if there was any flexibility.
I'll keep that in mind.
So, what did you think of this episode? Because I really don't think it's too bad.
No, I think I think it's funny. Like, I laughed a lot at the little things that were set up. I don't think it's the most. I think sometimes, like, it's some of the things we do are a little out of character. Like, there's no like subtlety when we're making fun of Caroline. But I don't know. It's kind of fun, and I remember it being fun to act it. Doing something that was a little bit unusual, just being openly mean. But well, to Caroline, that was typical for John and Charlotte. but I mean, I don't know. I liked it. I thought it was fun to rewatch.
Yeah, I thought so too. And again, I don't know why I buried it as number 9.
Yeah.
But
I think that probably speaks to the strength of the season.
Well, that might be true. Season 4 and 6 are definitely my 2 favorites. For whatever reason, I think they're the strongest. Have you ever heard of the Dick Van Dyke Show?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Well, anyway, I got the idea for the charades part from an episode where they're upset with their neighbors and they do kind of the same thing where they're like pointing at one of their neighbors for like hypocrite or something like that is the word they're trying to get. And so I was definitely inspired by that when I wrote this episode. Maybe I didn't think it was original enough and that's why I buried it. I'm not sure.
Oh, huh. Oh, well, I don't know. I feel like original enough for the time. But yeah, I loved your charade acting as well in this. It was perfect. Perfectly over the top.
Yeah, I enjoyed channeling my silly side for John, which at this point I haven't played him for about 5 years, so it's been quite some time now.
That's so weird.
Yeah, there you go. To bring the episode full circle, that's something to make us feel old.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of Scene by Scene, and thanks for listening. Scene by Scene is produced by GK Music and Magic Voice Records.